Welcome to Hire, Navigate Your Job Search. I'm your host, George Murray, and each week we take a topic for those people maybe new to job search or struggling in a job search, and we try to bring a subject matter expert into it to answer some of the questions that are helping, would help us kind of really have a competitive advantage out in the job market. And as we know, the job market has significantly changed over the past year and being more competitive. Just byline here is we are streamlining on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And by Saturday, we're uploaded on all the major platforms, I think 14 plus, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, hit the subscribe button to get notified for future shows and share a comment. It helps us get a better reach to help more people out there in job search. So this episode, we're talking today about things in job search at 55 plus and beyond. Age is just a number. So again, we all have all those misconceptions of when we get up there higher in our careers and towards the end of our careers and things like that. And we're going to bring in a subject matter expert, author Richard Gunderson. He is the founder and owner of Career Job Transition. He is a graduate of the University of Minnesota with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. He's a consultant, coach, and and he also lives in Lakeville, Minnesota. Richard is also the author of two books. First, Step Up to That New Career, Step Up to That New Career, that was published in March of 2022. That book documents his training and coaching process that unlocks the secrets of professional seeking new employment. And then his most recent book that was just out October 22nd is The Great Awakening of American Business. That book provides management recommendations on how to better have better hiring decisions, select quality managers, increase employee engagement, and improve employee retention. Now, do we have problems with all those things? Absolutely, we do. And so I want to welcome to the show, Richard. So Richard, I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, George. It's a pleasure.
Same here. So, hey, one of the things that I want to do first off is just tell us a little bit about your story and some of those potential misconceptions about job search overall.
I'd be glad to do that. For those of you that are currently unemployed, I can tell you I've been there, I've done that. Some of you may be looking to make a career change. I can tell you I've been there, I've done that. I worked for several companies in the past. One of those companies, I worked for them for 20 years. And I loved that job. I figured in time I would probably retire from that company. I wasn't certainly ready to retire, but I liked the job that well, and I really wanted to stick with it. And most of the executive team that was there when they hired me retired, and they brought in a new CEO, and he began to do some reorganization in the business and brought in some additional people to head up our division. And one day I was called in the corner office and told that my employment was terminated. It just shook me. I was shocked. I had no idea. Before the end of the day, I realized they laid 18 of us off. And I knew a lot of those people. They were quality people, quality employees, and yet now they're gone. We just never quite know when that's going to happen. And so many people, when they experience that situation, they ask themselves, what did I do wrong? And the answer usually is probably nothing. Or they might say, what could I have done to change that situation? And the answer is probably nothing. It had probably nothing to do with you. It probably had to do other things that you're not aware of, and it just it happens. And the other thing is to keep in mind that job change and career change for the average citizen, it's normal. If you might not have heard this statistic, but for professionals, during a lifetime, the average is people change careers about 6 times. For others that are going from job to job, they'll often change jobs a dozen times. So it's not uncommon, and it's not something to be ashamed of. So it happens. I've been fortunate in the last 6 years to provide training and coaching to unemployed professionals and those that are seeking new careers. And I found a real pleasure in helping people to solve that problem and to encourage them with the fact that they're capable of going out and getting that new job. Many of them are over 50, over 55. And I can tell you, your career's not over at that point. It doesn't need to be. You have a lot to offer. And I want to encourage you along that line, because it's true that life is not over at that point.
I would agree. I spent probably a lot of time like you have with folks, and mostly they get to a point, and maybe 55 is a lucky number or whatever. But I see a lot of people actually doing career pivots now, especially the last 3 years, really kind of gave people kind of a fork in the road that says, hey, I've been doing this for umpteen years or whatever, and I want to adjust. I want a whole different perspective, right? Because things have changed in the world, like you said.
That's true. That's true. Some of the issues, just as kind of an introduction to the subject, some of the issues that you might be facing at 55 or older are actually common to issues of people of all ages. It's normal when you find that that job is all of a sudden gone, that employment is gone, that paycheck that was coming in on a regular basis isn't there anymore, and you're freaked out because you've got bills to pay, you've got a mortgage, you've got food to put on the table. You're wondering, how am I going to make this all happen? Well, the problem often is people rush out in a panic to try to solve the problem. And the first thing they do is, I got to update my resume, and I need to get it out in front of as many people as possible. And I've got to set up as many interviews as possible. From my perspective, job transition is a process, and you need to follow that process. And if you rush out in a panic, you're just burning time that could have been used more widely to help prepare you to find that next job and to do it in the right way. And it is normal that you are experiencing anger or frustration, emotions of many kinds. Some people, even in the case of people I've seen in the past, where they're dealing with depression, they need clinical help. But it's a result of not being able to respond to the fact that they've lost their job and they need to take an approach to solving that problem. And when you're dealing with those emotions, you need to address that, because if you're hanging on to a lot of anger, you might think you can fake it and make it. But the truth is, when you're in front of HR or a manager, they can see that there's something else going on here, and that makes them uncomfortable. So you need to solve that problem to the point where you can put it behind you, and then you can more free yourself up to get out and tell your story and go out and make things happen the right way.
I totally agree. And just to add a little bit of content, as we were talking earlier, just before we started the show, is that, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers and listeners have seen this. You go on LinkedIn and you probably see it at least 2 or 3 times a day. I see it. I posted 300 resumes last month and to jobs and didn't get a single call. Well, that's only one part and a very small part of the whole process. And I think to your point, you've got to first kind of, deal with the baggage that just happened. How do I get that process? A couple of weeks, like I always tell people, if it goes beyond that, like you said, you probably should seek some medical attention, right, from the mental aspect, because especially if you, like you said, you put 20 years into a company, that's a huge hit to so many parts of your mental health, right? And so the second thing after being able to get over that initial obstacle of what just happened to me is setting the plan in place. And it's not simply just working on a resume and submitted, 300 resumes in a month, whatever. That's a portion of it, but networking and everything else, and what you do in coaching and everything else that we'll probably get to, right?
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that you might be over 55. One of the things that I tell people is don't make age an issue. Often we're creating our own problem. We think it's a bigger issue, and it's ageism in the marketplace is real. It's not true that all managers are afraid of hiring somebody over the age of 55, but some are, and it's obviously it's illegal, and some hide it better than others. It happens. Not everybody's doing it, but some are. But there's an important point to keep in mind here, that when an employer has an open position, they've got a problem that they need to solve. And your job is to figure out what is that problem and how can you convince them that you're the right person to solve that problem. And so whether you're 55 or 45 or 35, the situation's the same. There's a problem that needs to be solved. And with your years of experience, you probably are the right person to go out and solve it. You need to do some homework, figure out what is the problem, and you need to position your resume, your interviewing, and such that you can convince them that you are the solution to their problem. And when you do that, regardless of age, they're going to be interested in you.
Yeah, I love it because of the fact that one of the things I try to tell people, and I'm sure you've heard it, Richard, a couple of times, as I have, more than probably a couple of times, it's always act your age. Well, I've never been this age before, first point, right? So I don't know how to act. But the thing is most people tend to act their age, and act where they're going to be retiring, or they at least come off like that. And then they wonder why, and they blame everything else. It's like, okay, don't act your age, right? So have the energy, enthusiasm that you're going to turn around and put in 10 years and not 10 months.
Right. I've had the joy of working with people all the way from relatively new grads, maybe they're coming out of their first job, all the way up to senior executives where they're struggling with the same issues. I've had numerous people come to me and say, I can get all the interviews I want, but I can't land the job. What's my problem? And it's an issue of what is the problem that the employer's got, and make sure that interview is focused on that problem and on the fact that you are the solution to the problem. So regardless of what level you're at in the organization, you've got the capability to solve their problem. Your job is to sell them on the fact that you can solve their problem. And when you can, then things begin to happen. Again, doesn't make any difference what your age is or what your title is. The issue is the same. The same for all of you.
Oh, great. Shifting gears a little bit here, how can older job seekers showcase their wealth of experience on their resume so they don't have like 25 pages?
Well, first of all, a resume should never be more than 2 pages. But the point is a good one. And often where people make a mistake is, first of all, they rush out to send that resume that they've currently got to anybody and everybody. And the resume is all about them. The resume needs to be about the employer and how you can solve the employer's problem. And if you're not getting that message across on the resume, you're probably not going to get the interview. So your challenge, regardless of age, your challenge is go out and network with some people to find out more about that employee. Do some research on that employee. Meet with some other employees in that company. Find out where their challenges are. You might have to meet with several people, not the hiring manager, but others in the organization to find out more about who they are and what they're all about. And then position yourself accordingly. So make sure the resume, I like to speak of the sweet spot of the resume is the top half of the first page. You need to sell them in the top of the half of the first page that you're a candidate they need to know more about. So make sure you're talking those issues and selling them right in the top half of the first page. Now, when it comes to the whole of the resume, when it comes to, I like to say, the experience that you've got, your employment history, start with your most recent job and work back in time. Now, for the most recent jobs, go ahead and put your dates in there. Maybe for the most recent 10 years, list your dates. Beyond that, leave the dates off. Let's not create a problem that doesn't need to be there. When it comes to your education, you don't need dates. When it comes to older employment, you don't need dates. If you've got a lot of jobs in your background, you don't even need to include all the jobs. Those jobs that aren't relevant, that are years ago, they don't need to be in that resume. Put the most current, those things that are going to appeal to a hiring manager. Make sure they're the ones you're highlighting on your resume.
Yeah, like I was working at Stop and Shop, for those people in the New England area, right? As a retail assistant, right? When I was in high school. That's irrelevant. But I see them once in a while. I do see them.
Right. I also would put some emphasis on writing what we call star stories. Most people have heard about star stories, but if you haven't heard about star stories, STAR is stands for situation, task, action, and results. Write your stories where you basically lay out a situation, the task you took in response to that, what action you took, and then what kind of results did you achieve. And address results. This is for previous employment. Now, address the results in terms of how did you make a difference for that employer? How did they grow as a result of what you did? How did they achieve more sales as of what you did? How did they improve processes, efficiencies, lower costs as a result of what you did? Those are things that are going to be meaningful to any employer, and you need to be able to tell those stories. Now, when you're in a resume situation, you'll be asked common questions like, why do you want to work here? You'll also be asked behavioral interviewing questions. They'll be looking at a particular scenario or situation, and they want to know, how did you handle that, or how would you handle that? A star story is the right answer to a behavioral interview questions. I read a book years ago called The Star Interview. It's a small paperback. It's still available on Amazon for about $10. It's one of the best books I've ever written. I've ever read on the interview process and how to write a star story. I would encourage you to get that book. You're going to find it can help you in writing star stories. In the star story,
it also helps you in an interviewing process, because how many times have we been on the other side interviewing people and they kind of run off subject, right? And their response
Absolutely.
is like 8 or 10 minutes, and it's like, you didn't even answer my question.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because not only does the star story, a relevant star story, relevant to this next employer whose job you're trying to get, put a star story in there with results that are relevant to the kind of results they're looking for.
Right.
That's great evidence that, boy, maybe this person's the one that's going to solve our problem. So put some star stories that are relevant in the resume, be able to communicate them in response to questions that show up in an interview situation. And the excellent way to respond to the wrap-up of an interview is to ask the question, what would you expect me to accomplish in the first 6 months on the job that would tell you that you hired the right person when you hired me? And when they answer that question, that's when you bring another star story out and you tell them, let me tell you about a situation in the past where I addressed that very issue. I solved that problem for another employer. I can solve that problem for you. And what's that do for a hiring manager to know that, wow, I've got somebody right in front of me that can solve the very problem I'm trying to solve? That may have locked it up for you right there.
Absolutely. Continues to reinforce that you are the best person for that particular role.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
switching gears again a little bit, again, marketing strategy and branding. When I was first in my first job transition, I thought it was all about businesses and products, never realizing how important it is for individuals. So, what are some effective ways for older job seekers to expand their professional network and tap into the hidden job opportunities?
Well, as long as you bring up the hidden job market, let's talk about that. The reality is about 70% of jobs out there are not publicly advertised. You don't have any way to know what they are unless you're taking action to uncover those jobs. And that takes networking. And about 85% of people get their jobs because of networking, more specifically referrals. Referrals is the number one way to get jobs in this country. But referrals come generally as a result of networking. Now, the fact of the matter is that many people, regardless of age, when they lose their job, they start running out and applying for jobs online. The truth of the matter is that when you're going online, it's like making a cold call. You don't know them and they don't know you. So there's no emotional connection there at all. And statistically, there is on the average 250 people applying for every one of those jobs that are posted online. So you've got a lot of competition. And so let's say the hiring manager calls in 4 or 5 for an interview. What's your chance that you're going to be one of the 4 or 5 called in for the interview? Well, statistically, probably less than 2% chance. And then what's the chance you're going to get hired? Probably less than 0.5% chance of getting hired. So the answer, particularly if you're in the 55 and older categories, you need to network. So how do you do that? Well, create a list of all the people you know and they know you. I didn't say in the same career or the same industry, just people you know and they know you. And then call on those people and tell them what your situation is. Ask for some advice. Don't ask them to get you a job because that's a turnoff, but ask them for advice. They like to know that you respect their advice. And ask them for some suggestions. Who are the companies that hire people like you that they know and they hold in high esteem? And they think you'd be an excellent person to work in that particular company, and write that down. And then ask them, well, who do you know that works for that company that I might be able to talk to? Who would you refer me to? Not the hiring manager, but somebody I could talk to, or I'll learn more about who this company is, where their problems are that I potentially can solve. And then network with those people. Learn more about what changes have been taking place in that company. Where are the opportunities here? And then that ultimately is going to cause them to take an interest in you. And they're going to ask you for your resume. And I'd say, don't give it to them. Why? Because what's in your resume before you had this meeting doesn't sell anybody on you as the solution to their problem. Once you understand their problem, rewrite your resume to show how you are the answer to their problem. And that's the resume you need to put in their hands.
Oh, agreed. And to me, always seeking knowledge, being a lifelong learner is critical, especially. It doesn't matter what level or what part of the time in your career you're at. Which leads me into my next question is what are some, what actions can individuals update their skills and stay competitive, right? Get to a point where, do I know everything and I don't need to turn around and explore anything? Obviously, that's not true.
Well, in my opinion, your career always ought to be in pursuit of learning new things. If you haven't been doing that, then turn that around and look for opportunities to take seminars. Look at all the training that's available online. Look at YouTube, all of the courses that are on YouTube. Spend some time learning about things that you don't know about. It's really important that you stay abreast of all these things. Some people are still afraid of the computer. You need to get over that. Some people are afraid of social media. You need to get over that. A lot of employers look for your social media presence on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on any other number of other things. They want to know that you're present out there, and that says something to them about who you are and how up to date you are on things. When you write a resume, make sure that you're not communicating an age issue. One of the things you might think is silly is, what's your email address? If it's Yahoo or AOL, they probably say, this is an old person. They're still using the same old emails from way back. Hey, get a little more current with a Gmail and you won't have that problem. So those are things to be aware of also, in terms of, just being cognizant, being aware. Now, there's some fields like project management where there's opportunities to get certification. Often certification doesn't take a lot of time and doesn't take a lot of money. A certification can make a difference. Even what you're doing in terms of time you might be spending on the side, volunteering for a nonprofit organization. Maybe it's food shelf. Boy, that makes a difference in the mindset of a hiring manager that's looking at you as a person that's trying to figure out, who are you and how would you fit into this organization? And do you care about other people? That's a good message to get across. And volunteering is something that's worth pursuing. Take your time and do it.
Agreed. And especially if you're in job search for any length of period of time, one of the questions might come up in the interview. So what have you been doing since you've been out? If you've just been sitting behind a desk submitting resumes aimlessly, that kind of limits you as to, hey, you know what? I secured 2 more certificates in my field to keep abreast of the new technology, especially if you're in technology and AI and all that other stuff, IT. It's really critical for you to stay on top of those things because they're changing almost every day.
That's true. That's an excellent point. So I think George's point is something that you need to stay aware of. If you have gaps in your resume and you're concerned about that, so maybe there was a period of as long as a year where you weren't employed, and there's a gap in your resume that stands out like a sore thumb to somebody that's looking at your resume. Well, they're going to ask you about those gaps. You need to be prepared to tell them what you did, and you don't need to be afraid of it. Maybe you were helping somebody else out. Maybe you had a medical emergency in the house. Maybe you were doing some volunteering. Maybe you were doing some studying. Maybe you were pursuing another career or additional education. Those are all good things, and they're not going to be a turnoff to an employer. They will respect you and how you use that time. That shows up as a gap in your resume, but when you explain to them what you were doing, it comes across in a very positive way.
No, I would agree. So what are the advantages that older job seekers bring to the table?
Well, I think that experience is one. And when you're up in your years, maybe at 55, people don't like to say it quite that way, but when you've got years of experience behind you, that's really a wonderful thing. And some people are going to hear the concern, well, you're overqualified for the job. You need to be prepared with an answer. How are you going to respond when that question is thrown at you? And again, the issue is, don't get defensive. Tell them about how that you solve problems. Tell them about how that you know their problem and you can solve their problem, and that'll disarm them very quickly. So you've got to be able to, it's when you're not prepared to answer those questions that you get yourself into trouble. So think them through, plan accordingly, and you'll find that it's going to help you a lot.
No, I would agree. What are some of specific careers or online resources that can help older job seekers?
Well, there are a number of them. If you do a Google search, in fact, I looked the other day at that very question, and I found 4 of them. There's a site called retirementjobs.com. There's another one, retired brains. Interesting thought, retired brains. Seniors for hire, seniors in the number for hire. Workforce 50. And there's even a bunch of them under women over 50. Where they recommend people consider real estate opportunities, occupational therapist opportunities, nursing, finance opportunities. There's a lot of jobs, particularly with the situation we're in the economy today with unemployment as low as it is. There's a lot more receptivity to bringing people in, hiring them than there might have been 10 years ago. So there's a lot of jobs out there. Don't be afraid to pursue any job. If there's a field that you still have experience in, have interest in, even if it's a career change, don't run away from it. Boldly go after it. You might be surprised what you end up with. I mentioned earlier about the fact that when my job was terminated and 18 of us were gone, I can tell you that you had 18 people freaked out at that point. But I can also tell you it didn't take very long that a lot of those people found jobs that they at that point would have said, this is better than I had before.
Yes.
It's like the bird getting kicked out of the nest and realizing they can fly. You can fly too in your career, and it's not over. There's probably better things ahead than you can even anticipate at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I can really second that. A lot of the people that I work with and talk with, as well as I'm sure you have, is that I've seen them go on to even find better opportunities. Now, granted, it's a little blip, even though, when you're in job search, each day feels like a month. But when you look back, you're like, wow, that's an experience that I learned so much about. And more importantly, probably learned more about yourself than anything else and what you're capable of doing when initially you were really afraid of the things that might have to.
Right. You don't need to be defensive. You've got a lot to offer. And you just got to sell them on the fact that you're the answer they're looking for. It might take a little research on your part to find out what are their specific problems. And when you can show them that you can solve their problems, boy, they're going to like it, regardless of your age. Age will disappear as an issue when you show them I can solve your problem.
Nope, I agree.
Yeah.
The application tracking system, how we all love to hate it. How can I avoid having my resume being rejected by the applicant tracking system?
The application tracking system is used primarily for jobs in which people are applying online. And I don't have a problem with people applying for jobs online. But let me say this. Statistically, your chances of getting a job when you're networking are much better than when you're applying to a job online. So I don't have a problem with you doing both, but I would say commit most of your time that's available for your job search. Focus most of it on networking. Focus a smaller part on applying for jobs online. Now, as George mentioned, the applicant tracking system is basically a scanning software that looks at resumes to try to determine whether that resume is reflecting your ability to do the job that the employer is trying to fill. And so how does the scanning system recognize that you're the right candidate or the wrong candidate? Well, they primarily compare the keywords that are in the employer's job description with the keywords that you're putting in your resume. So when you're writing out a resume, part of customizing a resume is to look at the job description that you're applying for, highlight those hard skills and soft skills. Hard skills are the learned skills. Soft skills are more characteristic of who you are, judgment, interpersonal skills, communications. What are your hard skills? What are your soft skills? Which ones are showing up in the job description? And make sure you weave them into the story of your resume. Now, so when an applicant tracking system looks at your resume, If they don't see the things that they're looking for, they will throw out your resume. It won't even get back to the employer. And sorry to say, but 75% of resumes that go through applicant tracking systems are thrown away. They're rejected because you didn't tell a story that matches what the employer is looking for. So it's an issue, and a lot of people are unaware of it. But if you write a great resume and match it up with what the employer is looking for, you won't have a problem.
Yeah, I mean, now there's so much free resources out there to help you get those keywords to make sure that they're in the resume, right? Like I think it's jobscan.co or something like that. There's also, ChatGPT can help you as well to compare, the job description in your resume to make sure that those words are out. Because we were talking about this just before the show went live, those people that are posting, oh, I submitted 300 resumes, and it's like, and they're pointing a finger, and it's like, well, my dad said when I was younger, be careful of pointing a finger at three or pointing back at you. When are you going to self-reflect to say, what I'm doing now is not working. I need to change something, right?
Right. Well, as George mentioned, there are a number of apps out there that will allow you to basically insert or paste into the application a copy of your resume and a copy of the job description, and they'll compare the two and tell you how well you're matched up. JobScan is one of them, but if you go online, do a Google search, you'll find there's a half a dozen of them out there that can help you, and they're relatively inexpensive. Some of them might even be free, and that'll help you to keep from having an applicant tracking system throw you out.
Shifting gears a little bit, we talked briefly about this, but I want to kind of go into a little bit, maybe more detail of those people who are looking for jobs that are over 50, and they get the accusations or at least a response that you're overqualified. How do they overcome those types of things?
It really is a matter of don't get defensive. Once again, you got to bring out the strengths that you have. Sell yourself. What have you got to offer? And if you already know where their weaknesses are, talk to the fact that you have relevant experience that is what they're looking for. And maybe, whether you've got their job description or not, you probably know that marketplace well enough to know what most people are looking for that are hiring people in that kind of position, and convince them you have the skills and you have the experience. And if you can tell a star story that's relevant to the problems they're trying to solve, they're going to be very interested in you as a candidate. And you're going to find that in many cases, they're going to be willing to give you a job offer.
No, agreed. Well, Richard, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and your ability to help others, especially in some of their lowest times in job search. And I can tell you, we've been both in job search for a couple of times, that it's a lonely process, and you've got to get a lot, what I would say, a community out there to help you find your next opportunity. We talked about networking is so much important, but I do want to appreciate you taking the time to jump on and share your stories, share your experience, and help those who are maybe new to job search or struggling. So last question is how do people get in touch with you?
Best way would be to go to my email, which is richard@careerjobtransition.com, or info@careerjobtransition.com. As George mentioned, I also have the book Step Up to That New Career. That's available on Amazon, and it goes through the 10 steps that I recommend for a person that's pursuing that next job. And I would love to help you out if I can.
Absolutely. Again, thank you, Richard. We're going to put you in the studio. We're going to wrap up, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, George. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. So just kind of wrapping up, we know that job search, especially this last year, has really significantly changed over the previous year. But just recent statistics that just came out this week, it's really showing a trend where, it's being more competitive right now, but it's also getting a little bit better. Transitions hopefully are starting to be a little bit less. But again, you have to have a plan, you have to have a strategy, and you got to continue to evaluate that. I think some of the things that Richard stated is really hits the point. You know, you got to spend your most time that's got your biggest opportunity for success, networking being one big one. So, you know, I want to make sure that if you know anybody that this show can help, whether you watched us on YouTube or Facebook Live, or you've hit us on one of the podcasts, if you're out walking or running or whatever, ask you to, you know, tell other people about this and share, comment and like, and hit subscribe. And also thank Amazon, or my book, my first book, Hired Cut Your Career Search Time in Half, for sponsoring this show. If you have any questions, you can contact me. Have a great week and wish you great success.
You're my